as the tides eat away at the cliff sides every now and then. The currents never seem to make their way into these bays, and as such the sand and the beach just kind of shifts slowly. And that's where you fall, right onto one of these beaches. You look down and you have no shoes on, but it's nice. It's a nice warm sand. It's not the sweltering hot, burning in the sun for 5 hours sand. It's not the kind that you walk on and you wish you had you had something under your feet, or that you were just in the water at this point. It's the kind that's nice, where you kind of dig your feet in a little bit, take the moment to kind of shift them there, and then enjoy it. Then you hear something, as silence reigns. Just for the moment, there's a of the shoreline, and then very, very barely perceptible above the sound of the tide coming in every now and then, of the waves, you hear some kind of singing. Turn around, and you can tell it's coming from up the pathway, up on top of the cliff areas. So you look around. There's nobody around you. Sol Lestrad's nowhere to be seen. It's like he appears and disappears at will. And you take the initiative and you begin walking. You trudge. Make your way up. With each step, as you get closer and closer, and you begin walking up this channel leading up onto the top of the cliffs. On the side, there's like these grasses that kind of just sprout, like foop, foop, foop. These little bushy things with super long grasses. Just sway slightly in a small wind that passes up here. And then as you get closer to the top, to where the cliffs actually stop, and where there's these plains at the top, two things kind of happen. The one is that this singing becomes decently louder, and you can tell that it's multiple voices. It's a number of voices. Hard to say exactly how many. It could be 10, it could be 50, you're not sure. The other thing you notice as you reach the lip of this portion where the cliffs are, you can look over the cliffs, and they're reasonably flat. They're a little bit rolling here and there, not really hills, it's just up and down by a few meters, at best. And because it's so flat, you were sheltered down here, and you reach this top, and you're blasted by a wind that's just over the top of these cliffs, perpetually. It doesn't stop. It's just always blowing towards you. It's buffeting every now and then. It sends like sand into your face, because there's some up here as well. Not much. It's like tiny grains that were whisked up here in storms and such, and it's just like this tiny hail feeling as it smashes against your face. Kind of, you pull up whatever coat you have and try to hide your face a bit, and try to hear against the wind where the chanting's coming from. And you take a moment, and you look around, and now you can see over the lip of these cliff sides, and now that you've gotten onto the cliffs themselves, it's not hard to tell. There's a village a little bit further down, overlooking Death Moon Pass. And so you walk over, take the time. It takes you a little while, trudging along through the wind, although thankfully the wind is going with you. It's helpful. A little bit. Not entirely. And as you get closer, the voices get louder, and it's somber and yet joyous at the same time. It's this beautiful singing. Kind of a choir-esque song, but more tribal. Not like the church choir kind of thing, but a choir of people who live together and spend their days together and sing about the woes and the hardships and the good times together. As you arrive, the village it's pretty tiny. It's a small place. It has a few things. Downward, past where the village is, you can see there's a pathway going down into another one of these eddies. You see a few buildings. They seem to be made mostly of Some of them are a little bit wooden, although most of them seem to be made of clay and limestone and whitestone in different regards. And it's very, very pretty. It's nothing. The colors of the clay comes out really nicely. This dull terracotta red and purple and yellowish against this stark white rock. That combined with this kind of extremely light wood that they seem to have here, this put together, and the timber and the thatch covering the roofs. And the thatch is interesting because there's a lot of wind here, and yet they seem to have tied it down in such a way that it stays. It's not getting blown off at all. It's a quaint little village. Doesn't have too many houses. Maybe 50 some houses. You can see the edge of the village again, and you've only just entered it. And from what you can tell, every single member of the village is currently in the village square. Walking through it, all of the paths are... There's one street of some kind. Or it's not even a street, it's a road, it's cobbled. There's stones placed in... It was dug up and stones placed into the ground so that you could walk on it. All of the other little roads are just trampled down. Seem very simple in that sense. Walking through here and there, you see some tanning racks, and you see some fishing poles to hang them up, some poles to hang jerky. You see a few different structures of different kinds, and you can tell that here where they are, they seem to lead a very sea-based life. You wonder why they need a tannery. Look around and you don't see any form of mammals. You see no sheep or cows or anything that would have any reasonable reason for creating leather with. You look at one of the tanneries, and looking on it, the smell is awful, as tanneries generally are. For those that don't know how tanneries work, they strap something, and as you look closer, it seems to be fish hide of some kind, although large fish hides. And they hang it there, and they use a knife and they scratch it to get rid of the dying bacteria, until eventually, from the burning of the sun, it dries out the skin to make it leather. And it smells awful, because all of these parts that they scrape off is this slimy, mucousy, disgusting, bacterial, fetid matter that they want to get rid of so that the leather's usable. Ugh. It almost makes you vomit. It's very unpleasant. Thankfully, the wind carries it away more than it sticks around, so thankfully you don't... It leaves your nostrils again pretty quickly after you leave the tannery. You continue down towards the chanting. There, within the center of this village area, as you realize that most of the houses are built kind of circularly around the central area, and there's a lot less wind in this center, as you can tell that it's at least being drifted offward from the village by the way the houses are built, the form that they take. Precisely so that the center of the village is not this windy mess. And there are probably 60 or 70 people. People? No, not quite. Look around and you recall from the stories that there's often been many types of folks, but looking here they're all elves. But despite them all being elves, they all have this kind of beautiful, just very mattely colored skin. Some are this bluish, some are a little bit of a reddish Bordeaux, some are this bright lilac, or this yellowish, this bronze. Some of them have more of a teal. It's really very pretty the way they move around, and each of them shimmers just very faintly in the light of the skies. And there, a lot of them are singing, and a lot of them are dancing, as they're moving in this motion and this pattern between each other, and you kind of just stop and stand and look for a while, as within their garbs, which, interestingly, each person seems to have clothes that, to a certain level, match or complement the color of their skin. The very unique hue, and looking around, you see that no two are quite identical, as there's some reds here and some blues and some greens and some yellows, but each one is just very distinct from each other in its own ways. Some of them have Some of them are a uniform color. Some of them are more mottled to mingle kind of with patches of a yellow and patches of a green to kind of go over in each other, and it's fascinating. And as they move, it's beautiful to see the colors kind of swish between each other as if it was some kind of... It's like they were painting something with their performance. And the longer you look, and the longer the chanting goes on, you see that they kind of are. As they move, and they shift between each other, the longer they dance and the more the chanting continues, you see that these streaks of color, responding to their own colors, kind of shift off them, leading these trails behind them as you can see where they're moving, and it creates this weaving pattern between them, like this Celtic knot that shifts and moves in patterns. And this continues, and with each verse of the song, as far as you can tell, these trails become longer, until they're these full strings that weave into these huge knots and these huge loops that all come together, and each of the members swirling and dancing and jumping and leaping and ducking underneath, and goes together in this unimaginable pattern. You look at it and you feel like there must be something here. They must somehow know where to go, but the longer you look, the more just random it looks. You have no idea. You don't know how it works for them. You don't know how they do it. And then one figure catches your eye. This tiny child. This little elven kid. Probably, to your eye at least, 4 or 5. Extremely young. As she's as kind of young as she is, she seems to be fitting herself into... Oh, sorry about that. Fitting herself into this motion. And she continues her weaving as well, but all the while, most of the others laugh a bit and they have this joyful expression on their face. But they're very serious about it. But with each of her movements, she kind of just hops and jumps and skips around, and she's completing the motions as it seems to be appropriate, so since nobody seems to be stopping her. But there's just a massive grin on her face the entire time. And as you look at her closer as she's moving, she's got this... It's like a lilac, but extremely dark. So this purplish blue, and this super dark hair that looks black at the beginning, but as she swirls and it kind of lifts off a bit, and you can see the streaks in the light a bit, you can tell that it's also purple. Very, very, very dark purple. And just as all of the others, she seems to shimmer slightly in the sunlight whenever it directly hits parts of her arms and her legs and her face. And as the dancing continues, something happens to you. Not directly. You realize it's not part of this. As beside you, Soren Lestrade shows up. He says, "This is the beginning of something very important right here. You saw her, right? That's little Lurien. She's not so little anymore. It hasn't been for a while. See, this is where she began." And he kind of lifts his hand and twists it a bit. And as he does that, you see that the dancing speeds forward in the time lapse. As above you, for a moment, you can see sunrise, sunset, sunrise, sunset, sunrise, sunset. And then it becomes so fast that it's just this permanent twilight, and between it, every now and then you see snapshots of some of these elves, but mostly Lurien, doing things. All sorts of things. Partly doing this weaving dance. Partly, and as she grows older, you see she does this weaving dance on her own, and it begins creating these swirls. And this very minor form of magic, as you can't tell what it's doing. It's like a chant or a prayer of some sort. It's casting something, but it's not immediately recognizable what. And as she grows a bit older, you see her, what to you feels like the age of maybe 9. and then what to you feels like the age of 12. You see her as she grows, and partway through she begins weaving, and she has this sword, this beautiful sweeping scimitar, as that becomes part of it, part of the dance. And looking around you can tell by the forms of the cliffs and the way that the world changes and such that these are elves, they live longer. While she may look a few years older, probably been decades that have passed at this point. One, or possibly multiple. It's hard to say how old she is in years. But then the time slows again, as she looks potentially 14-ish, as she's completing a dance. And as she completes it, this shimmering that was on her skin, this shimmering feeling projects itself. And it projects itself onto the clothes that she's wearing as it just shimmers over everything. She lowers the sword and resheathes it. And then she turns to a male figure standing beside, kind of arms crossed. In some ways, watching the performance, making sure she's doing it correctly. She turns. At first, serious. Father? Father? You promised. The male figure sighs. I'm aware that I did. Father? And at this point, with the way that she said it, there's this mischievous grinning. I've done enough. I've learned, and I'm sure I'll be back to learn more. But you know it's time. You know I need this. I need to do this. Mom already said I need to do this. I'll be okay. He kind of looks at her. Lurian, are you sure? It's a dangerous world out there. Are you sure you want to do this? She's not listening to him anymore. She's already kind of gone past him, and as he continues monologuing a bit about, are you sure this is the right idea, and come on, to spend a few more years, your mother needs help anyway, and we have the fisheries, and everything is fine here. She's ignoring him completely. She's run past him, because despite everything that he says, she knows that he's already agreed. He already agreed before she did the weaving. She just had to complete it to show that she could. She runs into the house, and she immediately comes back out with a backpack. It's like she's already packed. Everything's ready for her. Dad, you know I need to go. You know I want to go. I need to learn this. You've heard the stories? There's such amazing things out there. I need to see them. I need to know what it's like. We've done weaving all this time, and I feel the magic. I feel it. But I need to know there's more. Because I know there's more. Remember that one traveler, like, a few years ago? He spoke of the academy. It sounded like such a wonderful place. You know I need to go. I deserve to go. It's my place to be. I'm going, Dad.